This soft maple on campus is not overly happy. This side, somewhat normal branching, some deadwood up the middle central stem, then a whole bunch of sporadic suckering, almost like a witch's broom on this side. Okay, and that is a telltale sign of salt damage. Not so much salt underground, but salt drift, salt spray that's landed on the foliage or on the branches. Kind of stunts the growth and causes stress and a lot of sucker. So here is a familiar place, our good old Scots pine plantation back here across campus. And as I'm walking in, you may notice a dog strangling vine. Sorry if this gets blurry as I walk and record. As I enter into the Scots pine plantation, I'm greeted by a thick understory of common buckthorn, the odd Manitoba maple, and of course in the upper canopy are Scots pines. So this is a forest that pre-European settlement wouldn't have existed, and yet here it is today. Unfortunately, as you probably have recognized, these are invasive species. None of these trees would have been here previously, and they outcompete our native vegetation. And this is the challenge of working with green spaces and urban trees. In urban forests like this, the ecology completely changes. So management changes, and how we maintain and how we care for these trees, how we care for these forests, because it can be easily overtaken by this invasive species. Notice the right tree for the right site. Here we have a honey locust. It's a good medium-sized tree, but it's still too large to fit under these power lines. So it's been pruned at this side, but still is constant maintenance. If we look up this way, we're going to see our secondary lines that run from the power line to the house and how they're interfering with branches. Okay, a good thing working in an urban environment is to recognize what are the lines that will kill you and what are the ones that won't. It's important. So these ones are low voltage. They shouldn't be dangerous. We always assume any power line is dangerous because things can go wrong. But these ones, although they are low voltage, they still need to be cleared away from this tree for safety. If I look across here, notice the blue spruce in the distance. What a better tree placement that tree was, as it's narrow and conical and can grow up beside the power lines without interfering like this honey locust. Okay, looking up at all these different power lines, again, which are the dangerous ones? The top ones are the live wires. They're not insulated because the voltage is too high, and so those are extremely dangerous. By law, you cannot come within 10 feet of those lines. And that means the tree, the branch, the tool, whatever you may be doing, you cannot be within 10 feet of those power lines because electricity can arc and still contact you. So unless you're certified, you must be minimum 10 feet away. Below that, the black lines you see are the triplex, so that they're a 3-strand wire that runs from house to house. And that's a lower voltage to give you the power in your house. And at the bottom we have our communications, bell, cable, things like that. And again, low voltage. The challenge we have with these big old trees is the safety perspective. And you can see the deadwood up in this canopy. Okay, removing the deadwood doesn't make the tree healthier, but it does make the tree safer due to the liability. And that's part of the investment we have with urban trees, is we need to maintain them for the pure benefits and for the safety. There's an example of something I hope you don't do, but it's not hurting the tree. What hurt the tree already was this big pruning cut that's been done wrong and ended up tearing down the tree. Okay, so that's been a big problem. Inside this cavity, they've used expanding foam, like expanding insulation foam for construction. We use that instead of concrete now, but don't do it. It's a waste of time. It's messy, it's ugly. The only purpose people do to put that in there is to keep squirrels out and such, this is their habitat. It's what they need. So if you must, that's the option instead of concrete. but it doesn't do any good for anybody. If you look way up on this tree, you will notice that there is a cable. It's a little bit hard to tell because it blends in so well, but it's there. If you can just see it anchored to the right and then spanning over to the left stem, and that is a static cable. That is a steel cable, has limited movement for the tree, but its purpose is to hold the two stems together to keep them from overextending, which would cause failure. And if we look up at this tree, we've got a Norway maple, and this has a different cabling system. So this is a Cobra cable. The other steel cable is a static line. Cobra cable is the product name, but the type of cabling system it is a dynamic system. Dynamic meaning there is movement allowed for the cable, but it doesn't overextend. So you can see the swelling in the middle of the rope. It's a black UV resistant rope. It's hollow braid, so you put a rubber shock absorber inside of the cable, and that allows there to be some stretch with the rope so that the tree has some natural sway. The cable is not drilled into the tree like with the steel static lines where we drill into it. It has a rope that wraps around the tree. This rope is set in a way so that the tree can actually grow and expand with it. Notice the big root flare on this tree. Remember, as you're assessing a tree, walk around 360 degrees and check all parts of the tree. But this is good. This is what we want to see as a big root flare. It shows that the roots are doing the right thing and that they're growing away from the tree, not around. Notice how this tree looks like a hydro pole. It just runs straight down into the ground. There's no flare, no sign of the roots extending into the ground. This is a big warning sign. Even if we can't see it, we should be suspecting that the roots are girdling or wrapping around the tree, because the tree is being limited. It cannot extend its root system out to support itself. This means that it cannot hold itself upright in heavy winds and it could fail, or probably means if there's girdling roots, that as the roots grow and the tree grows, it will strangle itself. This tree jumps out as very unhealthy. And we can look at that, but to explain what that means might be something else. So what I look at is the tips of the foliage. And notice how the twig extensions are very short. Twig extensions are last year's growth. And on a healthy, fast-growing tree, you'd see long, straight stems. Here we don't see that. We see short tips, indicating that last year's growth was not significant, and it hasn't been for a while. And that often means if something's going on up top that's not healthy, that's a result of what's happening below ground. And notice on this location, that's another telephone pole example. Probably a sign of girdling roots. And if we look more closely, right here, we'll notice that there's a root going right here, where roots should be going this way. This is overlapping here. Quite likely signs of girdling roots. Notice how this ginkgo has a single dominant stem. The lateral branches are small, widely spaced. They don't have tight angles, and one single leader leads this tree to this peak, to its apical tip. Okay, and that is what we want in a tree. That imitates how trees grow in the forest. The challenge in urban environments is they are often more open grown, leading to more poor structure. So our goal is going to be to try to prune trees to look this way. To compare our previous ginkgo to this young sugar maple, We have a single dominant stem, but at some point right here, the tree lost that apical dominance. Okay, it broke off from one single stem to two codominant stems. And this type of form is the beginning of the end for the tree. It has room to grow right now, but in the future, this codominant stem is the point in which trees typically fail, as that load gets heavier and provides more stress on the tree. This is where one pruning cut can change the life of this tree. Although this is a tree a lot of people would like planted in their front yard because it's got a big round canopy. If you look closer, we've got problems that came right from the nursery. Okay, 3 codominant stems, all with included bark. This seam where the trees have kind of grown against each other. When we have included bark like that, the tree is not sealing properly. Okay, it's basically 2 trees growing on top of one, and it's not providing the support the tree needs. So this is a common area for the trees to fail as the canopy gets taller and larger. Down here, these are better examples of branch attachments. This is called the branch bark ridge. This ridge of bark where the stem and the branch tissue grow together and force the bark out. This creates overlapping tissues of branch and bark tissue, creating a collar right in here. I can feel it with my finger that there's a branch collar, a swelling here. And that's good. That's when you're splitting wood and you hit a block of wood full of knots. That's that strength, and that makes it so hard to split. So if a wood is that hard to split because of knots, imagine what it does for the tree in its strength. Okay, so those make very good branch attachments. We typically don't see failure from these attachments. Okay, so we have the branch bark ridge, the branch collar underneath and going around. There's a swelling right in here that you can see. So when we're making a pruning cut, we'll talk about this later this semester, we want to stay outside of that branch collar. That way we're only pruning branch tissue and not stem tissue as well, as this is a major overlapping area of that tissue. Notice how this hackberry has several small codominant stems. Okay, if unpruned, if we leave this, they will continue to grow upwards into codominant stems and probably have included bark because of their sharp branch angle. But this is perfect at this age. It's got a nice single stem until then. We can easily fix this at this age to prune it and avoid future problems by maintaining that apical dominance and not allowing codominant stems to establish. We see a good root flare on this Norway maple, but as we look up, I see a seam, and that seam comes from the included bark of these 2 stems. Now, actually there's 3 there, but that's the codominant stems of the 2. And if we look up further, we'll see that's a lot of weight. So all that weight as the wind blows and separates those 2 stems is all put on that pressure point of right there. Okay, if we look up further, there was a previous failure in this tree, and that appears to, you can see the dark spot at the top of where the wood broke away. That would have been the included bark there. So that would have been a branch that with included bark that failed previously in a storm. Much smaller scale, but telltale sign of what this kind of branch formation can do. This hackberry has had some pruning done previously, and unfortunately they aren't great pruning cuts. If we walk up and look at this one a little more closely, you're going to see that there is callus right here. That is healing tissue. Healing is not the right word, but we'll discuss that later this semester. But that is tissue that is growing over top of the injury to seal the injury of a pruning cut. Unfortunately, what should happen though is the pruning cut should be such that that callus can grow evenly all around the injury. Here it does not. You can see up here that there is, that cut should have been closer. So the callus cannot grow over top. It first has to grow up over top of the stub that was left and then seal over top of the injury. Because it cannot do that, callus is going to start growing on one side. Years down the road it will finally catch up, but that leaves this injury open for a longer period of time, meaning that decay can get in more quickly. So every time there is an injury on a tree, whether it be an elephant hitting the tree, knocking the bark off, us making a pruning cut, anything, that opens the tree up for injury and potential for decay to enter. So notice this pruning cut. This is an old pruning cut right here. And this is exactly what we want to see. As the years go by, the tree buries that old injury in wood. So new growth has grown out. Callus tissue has grown over top. We know it's been a good pruning cut because this line in the middle, it's in the middle, meaning that all the callus has grown evenly over top of that injury and met in the middle. So this is the best case scenario we have when we're pruning. This is always my favorite stop on the walk. We can stop and see my old friends, the sycamores. These sycamores are very unique to the town of Lindsay. They're unique in that they're not native to this area. They're Carolinian. They grow further south. Okay. This one has a huge cavity in it. It is a rare sycamore tree. Please do not use it as a garbage can. But they're unique in that they don't grow in this area. So someone had planted this tree over 100 years ago. These trees, I should say. They are prone to having big cavities like this. This is nothing unordinary for sycamore. Settlers in the early days of settling North America used giant old growth sycamores with cavities to house livestock like pigs, chickens, and grain as well until they could build buildings. So they're a unique heritage tree. And they're a heritage tree, meaning they have historical significance. They are a large, significant tree. They're unique, and there's a connection with them to the community. And there's a great photograph in the Lindsay Archives of the World War I Regiment in 1916, having their picture taken not very far from here, and in the background are very young sycamore trees. They were 101 years younger than they are today. So very unique that way. And this one, if I can get the lighting okay for you to see, there's concrete inside of that tree. And that's a testament to the urban forestry or the arboriculture trade. Back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, that was common practice. We treated tree decay like tooth decay. And they'd send arborists, back then called tree surgeons, inside those cavities with chisels to chisel out all of the decay and then fill it with concrete, thinking that was the proper thing to do. We had the technology and the skills to do it, but we didn't know the science behind it. Today we know it's wrong. And furthermore, it's very hard to cut a tree down this full of concrete. Hey guys, in case you're missing this place, thought I'd just send in a little shot of home.